The Supreme Court video. The last frame of Menglong. The file appeared online at exactly 2:17 a.m. No announcement. No press release. No watermark. Just a single red tag stamped in bold digital characters. Supreme Court Evidence Archive. Declassified. Within minutes, the video was everywhere. It opened in silence. A narrow hallway. Cold marble floors reflecting harsh fluorescent light. A clock on the wall ticking with the kind of sound that made time feel like it was dripping instead of passing. At the far end stood a man in a dark coat, hands folded, posture straight, face calm in a way that felt unnatural. The caption beneath the frozen frame read, Subject, YUM, Final Recorded Appearance. The world froze. Because the man on the screen looked exactly like Menglong. Not the star. Not the actor. Not the smiling face from red carpets and costume dramas. This was someone who carried the same face, but with shadows in his eyes, as if he had seen something the rest of the world was never meant to know. The video began to play. Footsteps echoed. A door opened. A voice off-camera spoke, low and controlled. Do you understand that this recording will be sealed for 20 years? The man nodded once. Yes. Do you wish to make a final statement? For 3 seconds, he said nothing. Then he lifted his head and looked directly into the camera. And the internet would later swear, hand on heart, that in that moment, it felt like he was looking at them. Everything you think you know, he said softly, is built on a performance. A pause. Some of us were trained to perform from the moment we were chosen. The clock ticked louder. Not for the screen, he continued. For the system. That was when the comments exploded. Conspiracy threads multiplied. Fans argued. Skeptics laughed. But no one could look away. The camera zoomed in. You saw me in costume, he said. In light. In romance. In heroism. You believed that was fiction. A breath. The fiction was the freedom. The voice off-camera interrupted. Please stay within the scope of the inquiry. He smiled faintly. A sad smile. The kind that comes when someone realizes the end has already been written. There is no scope wide enough, he replied. Not for what was done. The video cut. For 1 full second, the screen went black. Then the second clip began. This one showed a room. Windowless. A single table. A thin stack of files bound in red tape. On the cover, Project Mirror Lotus. His hand, reached out, fingertips brushing the edge of the folder. You train them to disappear, he said off-camera now, his voice recorded from a different angle. Not physically. Publicly. A new voice answered. Older. Colder. They volunteered. They were selected, he corrected. There is a difference. The footage shifted. A photograph slid across the table. Faces blurred. Ages listed. Contracts stamped. Identities reassigned. Do you know what it does to a person, he asked, to live under a name that is not theirs, in a life that was written before they could consent to it? Silence. You called it talent management, he continued. But the clauses, the surveillance, the silence agreements enforced by fear. The word fear lingered in the air like smoke. Another cut. Now he was standing again in the hallway from the first clip. But this time, his composure had cracked. His jaw was tight. His eyes were glassy. They told us fame was protection, he said. That visibility meant safety. A hollow laugh escaped him. Visibility was the cage. The clock read 2:41. You take a child, he said, voice trembling just slightly. Teach him to smile on command, to cry on cue, to love on script. Then you tell him his real thoughts are dangerous. That silence is survival. The off-camera voice asked, almost gently, Are you accusing the institution of coercion? He shook his head. No. I'm explaining the architecture of it. Another file appeared on screen. This one labeled Incident 47B. The timestamp jumped. The atmosphere changed. The lights flickered. You don't want this released, he said quietly. The older voice replied, You requested this hearing. Yes. So that the truth would exist somewhere, even if buried. The camera zoomed in on his face again. There was an accident, he said. That's what the public was told. A pause. It wasn't. The word dropped like glass shattering on marble. The next frame showed a rooftop at night. Wind howling. A figure standing at the edge, face blurred for privacy. A coat flapping violently. You see despair, his voice narrated over the footage. You don't see the pressure that manufactured it. Static crackled. They said he was unstable, he continued. But instability doesn't sign confidentiality agreements. It doesn't attend meetings. It doesn't receive warnings. The screen froze on the blurred figure. He tried to leave. The words felt heavy, like they were pressing down on the viewer's chest. He was reminded of the cost. Silence. Then, almost in a whisper. And then he was gone. The final clip returned to the hallway. The man who looked like Menglong's stood there again, but now his shoulders sagged, as if the weight of everything he had held inside was finally visible. Why reveal this now? The off-camera voice asked. He closed his eyes. Because the narrative is complete, he said. And someone has to break the frame. He opened them. They will say this video is fabricated. That I am confused. That memory is unreliable. A faint, sad smile. They always say that when the story threatens to change. The clock struck 3 o'clock. Is there anything else you wish to add? He looked into the lens one last time. If you are watching this, he said, it means the silence failed. The screen cut to black. One final line appeared in white text. Archive closed, status, sealed. And then, as if to ensure no one would ever forget what they had just seen. Released by order of the court, for historical record only. The internet went into meltdown. Was it real? Was it symbolic? Was it a dramatization, a warning, a leak, or a message disguised as evidence? No official statement followed. No confirmation. No denial. Just a video. A face. A voice that sounded too calm, too controlled, too practiced to be lying, and too tired to be performing. And a single question echoing through every comment section, every forum, every late-night conversation. If everything was a performance, what then was the truth? The video did not end. That was the first thing people realized hours later, when a hidden timestamp was discovered in the metadata. The file was longer than what had been released. Cold marble. Fluorescent lights. A clock ticking like a countdown no one had agreed to start. The man with Menglong's face stood there again, motionless, as if carved out of shadow and discipline. But this time the camera angle shifted. It moved closer, slow and deliberate, until every micro-expression could be seen. The tightening of his jaw, the controlled breath, the way his fingers flexed once before becoming still again. A door opened behind him. The sound was soft, but the echo felt endless. Two figures entered the frame, their faces blurred, their footsteps perfectly synchronized. One carried a thin tablet. The other carried nothing at all, which somehow felt more threatening. State your assigned name, the first voice said. He answered without hesitation. The name was not Menglong. It was a code, a designation, a number that had once belonged to a child in a training facility where windows were covered, schedules were absolute, and dreams were filtered through contracts before they were allowed to exist. State your public identity, the voice continued. He paused this time. Menglong. The camera lingered on that pause. That single, dangerous hesitation. You acknowledge that the two are not the same, the voice said. Yes. Explain. His eyes lifted. Calm. Steady. But something flickered behind them, like a light briefly trying to escape from behind thick curtains. The first was created to obey, he said. The second was created to be seen. Silence. Which one is speaking now? The voice asked. A beat. The one that remembers. The clock ticked louder. The hallway seemed to narrow, as if the walls themselves were leaning in to listen. The camera cut to archival footage. A rehearsal room. Mirrors on every wall. Boys lined up in rows, repeating the same movement again and again until their bodies moved before their minds did. An instructor's voice counted in sharp, metallic tones. Mistakes were corrected not with words, but with looks that carried consequences. A younger version of him stood in the second row. Eyes focused. Back straight. Smile practiced. The narration returned, his voice layered over the footage. They told us discipline was love. That control was care. That silence was professionalism. A clip changed. A dormitory. Lights out. A boy sitting on his bed, clutching a phone he wasn't supposed to have. The screen showed a message. Do you want to leave? Another message followed. You can't. The hallway reappeared. He was still standing there. Still composed. But now the camera caught the faint tremor in his hands. You signed before you understood, the off-camera voice said. That is standard. Yes, he replied. So is regret. A folder was placed into view. Its cover bore a single word in red ink. Control. Inside were clauses highlighted in yellow. Surveillance permissions. Behavioral restrictions. Relationship approvals. Silence agreements with penalties that escalated from financial to something far more ambiguous. Do you know what it means, he said quietly, to have your emotions classified as liabilities? The camera zoomed in on one line. Public attachment requires authorization. Another cut. A studio set. Bright lights. Artificial rain falling for a romantic scene. He stood across from a co-star, eyes filled with scripted longing. The director shouted action, and he delivered the line perfectly, voice trembling, gaze intense, hands shaking just enough to look real. The narration whispered over it. We learned to make the unreal convincing. The scene froze. And to make the real invisible. Back to the hallway. Why did you agree to testify? The older voice asked. He did not answer immediately. The clock ticked. Once. Twice. Because someone broke, he said. A new clip appeared. A dressing room mirror, cracked at one corner. A phone lying on the counter, its screen recording. A voice, young, strained, desperate. I can't keep pretending, the voice said. They say it's just an image. But I don't know where my real face is anymore. The recording cut abruptly. The hallway felt colder now. He asked for help, the man said. Not from fans. Not from the public. From the system that built him. And, the voice prompted, and the system reminded him of his obligations. A pause. Reminded him what silence was worth. The word worth echoed, heavy with meaning. The camera shifted angle again, revealing a security camera mounted in the corner of the hallway. Red light blinking. Always watching. You were monitored, the voice said. We were all monitored, he corrected. Another archival cut. Text messages scrolling across a screen, time-stamped late at night. Warnings disguised as advice. Suggestions that read like threats when placed side by side. Rest more. You look tired. Remember your contract. Public image is everything. The narration continued. They never had to say, don't speak. They only had to remind us what would happen if we did. Back in the hallway, he finally turned his head slightly, looking at the security camera instead of the main lens. Do you know how many versions of myself exist on your servers? He asked. The older voice did not respond. Smiling. Crying. Confessing. Denying. Loving. Breaking. Every angle saved. Every weakness archived. His gaze returned to the main camera. You don't just manage images. You collect souls in high resolution. The clock struck another minute. The lights flickered. For the first time, his composure truly cracked. Not in tears, not in anger, but in something more dangerous. Clarity. The public thinks fame is noise, he said. But inside, it is very quiet. A breath. So quiet you can't hear yourself disappear. The off-camera voice softened, almost imperceptibly. What do you want the record to show? He straightened, as if preparing for a final take. That the hallway exists, he said. That the contracts exist. That the pressure exists. And that the people inside the frame, he added, eyes steady, are not characters. They are collateral. The camera held on his face. Not the celebrity's face. Not the actor's face. But the face of someone who had finally decided which identity would speak, no matter the cost. The screen froze on that expression. And the words appeared.